as you know, there is something which is very important. Males are different from females in eating disorder, and this is quite obvious. But why? Why? And you know that in general, this is the case in child and adolescent psychiatry. Depression, you know, in child depression, the sex ratio is 1, and after 13, 14, the sex ratio is 2. Why? And in schizophrenia, maybe, etc., etc. So the question of sex ratio in child and adolescent psychiatry is an old question, and still at the moment there are no clear answer about why there are such difference. Does it come from the way society sees male and female, or does it come from something which is more biological? This is what we are going to see during these minutes, and in a way, on a more epistemological point of view, you know, this is typically a complex subject and sensitive, because gender, sex, as you know, this is quite sensitive, in particular at the moment. And so it is difficult for a scientist to deal with a sensitive subject because of conflict of interest. Not money, but internal conflict of interest. And so I have to begin with my own conflict of interest. And of course, obviously, this is perhaps not so obvious, but I am a male, and okay, and I am 60 years old, and you know perfectly that this is likely to bias me. When my mother was born, women were not allowed to vote in France, and she was a teacher, and when she became a teacher, she was not allowed to have a bank account. Only male could have a bank account. And when I was a kid, my father was officially the head of the family. And I remember I was 8, we had a dinner, and I asked, but why is he the head of the family? And he was smiling, and my mother said, well, I don't know really, but that's life. And so, you know, I have been conditioned by that, and so I cannot get rid of that. This is impossible. This is impossible. And so even I am a scientist, I want to do science with that, but inevitably I cannot be neutral. So after, there is not only that, I have to think about myself, what could be the bias inside me that are likely to interfere with what we are going to talk about. And I think that I have to acknowledge that I am fascinated by neuroscience, but I don't think they are really useful for us. This is what I feel, and I am honest with you. And so perhaps when I will present results, I will minimize the importance of neurobiological arguments in the effect of sex in anorexia nervosa. Perhaps. Or perhaps the opposite, because I know my bias. You know, perhaps I will do exactly the contrary. And I have learned a lot from socio-economical science. And perhaps also it is a bias. So, if we engage in a scientific discussion, we have to define words. Definition is very important. And so we should have to define anorexia nervosa, and it is already a mess. But anyway, you all know more or less what it is, and I will not enter in details. But we have also to define gender. And as you know, this is sensitive and not so simple. And so I will begin as a scientist to override the definition, and I propose to discuss first on another question, what is a male, what is a female? And this is different from the question, what is a man and what is a woman? And do you know what is the definition of a male and a female? Yes?
I say it's the biological one, so based on biological sex.
Yes, yes, but okay, male and female, it is biological, but in biology, what is the definition of a male and a female? It comes from the fact that on our planet, for reproduction, for some species there is parthenogenesis, you can cut yourself and reproduce, but most often there is sexual reproduction. For plants, for insects, for crocodiles, for mammals, etc., there is a sexual reproduction. To reproduce, you have to take gametes from two bodies, half of a cell, and from these two half of the cells, you produce one new cell, which is one new being, and etc., etc. And you know that the interest, this is quite complex. This is quite complex as a mechanism, but as you know, the interest is for diversity, and so to be more efficient when the environment change. This is an adaptation, and this is the evolutionary point of view. So on our planet, reproduction, which is quite important for our survival, the survival of our species, there is a sexual reproduction with two members. So sex is reproduction, sex is alone, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but reproduction is for two. And interestingly, nearly always when you have sexual reproduction, you have anisogamy. Nearly always, whether it is for plants, insects, etc. Anisogamy means that when you have gamete 1 and gamete 2, the two gametes have not the same shape. There is one big gamete that does not move and one small gamete that moves. And by definition, the living subject, the living being that has the big gamete is a female, and the living subject or being that has a small gamete that moves is a male. This is the definition. This is the definition. And interestingly, there is a very important diversity with being a male and a female. As you know, for snails, for flowers, they are both male and female. Within the flower, there is a big gamete, and there is also a small gamete with the wing that goes from flowers to flowers, and they can reproduce even if they don't move. And snails, this is exactly the same thing. For grouper, this is this big fish. Grouper, they begin, when they born, they are a female, all of them. And when they reach 12 years old, they become a male. All groupers are transsexual. This is their way of life. With human being, being male or female come from genes, as you know. And in fact, you are either a male or a female, or sometimes not a male, not a female, because you have no gamete in a way or in another. But in fact, up to this moment, there has no been transsexual human being, because no human being were a male and then a female, or a female then a male, because at the moment there has been no human being that had big gamete, oocyte, then spermatozoid, or the contrary. Most people consider that being a male or a female comes from genes, but this is true for mammals, this is not true for living being in general. For instance, for crocodile, it is the temperature of the egg that determines being a female or a male. If the egg is deep in the ground, it will not be at the same temperature as if it is at the surface, and so you will have male or more female, whether the egg is deeper or not. And so in fact you have to consider that being a male or a female come from two different metabolic pathways. You have a small human being, and because there is a trigger, and for us it is a gene, we become a male or a female, or from time to time something else. So at this time there is a big question, are males different from females? And this is in line with our question about anorexia nervosa. Obviously there is a difference, but in general, what are the differences? Concerning the genitals, this is quite obvious. Most males have genitals that are different from females. I know that at the moment there is a big discussion about intersexuality, etc., etc. But you know, we are living with, we are discussing about biology. Biology is not like mathematics. In mathematics, you have things that are true or not. With biology, you have things that are more or less true. This is a statistical point of view, you know. And on a statistical point of view, this is quite true. Males have different genitals than females. And if you go on the beach and people are naked, you can see very easily whether they are male or female. And there is really no discussion about that. So this is not really a problem. More interestingly, there are secondary sexual characters. The voice, the composition of muscles, you know, how much fat there is in muscle, size, weight, etc., etc. But all these secondary characteristics are mostly statistics. And this is very important. This is very important because I am sure that in your mind you are conditioned to think that males are like that, women are like that, females are like that, you know. But in fact, most often this is only statistics. Males, in average, are stronger, but I can fight with many females and I will be knocked out just immediately, you know. So, and you know, a statistical rule, law, this is very different than a universal law. Concerning health, indeed, males are different than females with a problem of health. Because we have not the same chromosome and males have only one X chromosome, so there is no backup if there is a gene that has a problem, and so we have males, we have problem with mutation in X genes. And so in psychiatry, for instance, there is Fragile X syndrome that affects more males in terms of symptoms than females. But on the contrary, females have two X chromosomes. And you know, and so they have two genes that are potentially active. But in fact, only one is supposed to be active. The other is not active, except when there is a bug. And when there is a bug, both of them can be active, and this can produce health problem. And you know that there is a sex ratio in lupus, and in fact, lupus and anorexia nervosa are the two diseases where the sex ratio is the most important, about 10. If we accept breast cancer, etc., which are obviously diseases that are determined from sex. So why, and this is a big question, why lupus and other autoimmune diseases mostly affect females than males? And one explanation comes from the fact that in some women, some genes on the X chromosome both genes could be active, and this could induce the disease. So we can see that genetics bugs could lead to different health problems. After, there are more complex situations about pain. Do females suffer more from pain than males? This is a very old question. About hysteria, you know, they speak a lot. Women have a lot of emotion, and so they, it's hurtful, and so we don't really believe that they really suffer. And this has been proved in some epidemiological studies, where we have noticed that male GP prescribe smaller amount of painkiller to women than female GPs. It is as if a male GP don't really believe that the female patient they have in front of them really suffer. She says that she suffers, but I'm not so sure of that. And so there is really the question, is there a difference? And this is very interesting, but because there has been many papers with animal model, etc., on pain in female and males in mammals. And there are meta-analyses. And this is very interesting because the meta-analyses are completely biased by the ideology of their authors. So 20 years ago, meta-analysis said, well, obviously there is a difference in pain between male and female. We can see that in animal models. We can see that during the woman cycle, you know, during the evolution, ovulation, the level of pain that is felt is different than the other at the other moment, after menarche or before, etc., etc. And 10 years after, people say, no, this is a social construction. All these papers are biased. There is no difference of pain between male and female. And this was ideological because male and female are supposed to have equal rights, then they are supposed to suffer in the same way. You know, this is completely crazy, but it was exactly at the origin of scientific papers that were written. And recently, in Nature Review Neuroscience in 2020, there has been a very comprehensive review about pain in male and female, and indeed there is a difference that comes from sociological, psychological arguments, but also biological. There are strong biological arguments that show that, in fact, female do feel pain more than male. And so we could ask the same question about depression. As I told you, sex ratio of depression in children is about 1, and after puberty it is 2 or more. Why? And it is, on my opinion, we don't know. We don't know if it is a bias, social bias, the fact that, in fact, males socially have problems to tell their emotion. Some kind of alexithymia, as we learned yesterday. Male could be prone to have alexithymia more than female, and so when they fill scales, perhaps the rating is biased. This is a hypothesis. But we have also testosterone and estrogen, and you know that testosterone and estrogen have an impact on mood. And so what is really, on my opinion, there is a mixture of all of that, but the level of evidence is very weak, and we have not the same amount of information as in pain. Risk-taking, addiction. You know that male are more risk-taking than female, in particular after puberty. And the big question about death. This is very interesting. In my lab, I had a lab that does research in epidemiology. And many of my female colleagues are doing studies on gender inequity in health. And they are all women, and they are always saying that poor little females, they suffer that male are doctor and doctor are male, and they don't recognize correctly symptoms in female, which is true. This has been shown for myocardial infarction, etc., etc. But I always tell them, okay, but just look at the death gender hazard ratio with time. That is the probability to die at the given moment, whether you are a female or a male. So when you are very young, you know, newborn, male newborn are more frail than female newborn. For a reason that is not clear. Fetus also. The probability to die when you are a male fetus is more important than when you are a female fetus. And this is the same for after a few months. Even when you are hospitalized in intensive care units, the probability that the baby, when he is a male, die is more important than when it is a female. And after between 5 and 10, you know, this is exactly 1. The probability to die in both sexes is exactly the same. And after puberty, 2, 3. Then it decreases after 30, and it increases a little bit when you become to my age. Why? And this is a big question. We have seen here in Esther's presentation what happened during puberty, and so there are many biological things that could explain that, but is it really the only answer to this important question? And why does it come back after? It is said that here, when there is a male and a female that are in a couple, when one dies at 16, when it is the female that dies, the male is likely to commit a suicide. When it is the male that dies, the female is relief. This is a geriatrician that study a lot of that, and it is not so wrong. It is not so wrong. Anyway, this question, you know, a hazard ratio of 3 for survival, this is huge. This is huge in epidemiology. And so we have to think about that. And there is, so the question why? And I have a hypothesis because we are dealing with epistemology. You know, yesterday we had biological explanation, but I propose to you another explanation, which comes from the evolution, and I am not alone to say that. The hypothesis is that on an evolutionary point of view, males are useless. And we are going to discuss about that. So, what are males good for? So obviously, because there is sexual reproduction, to reproduce, there is a necessity that male gives their sperm. Okay. And this is good for evolution. But is there something more? And here, in fact, males are an energy scandal. And I am sure you never realize that. You never realize that, and you can see the whip-tailed lizards. This is this type of lizard. Whip-tailed lizards are only females. They are only females. This is very likely that one day, for one reason or another, a whip-tailed lizard arrived in an area where it was an ecological niche. The lizard could widespread a lot because there was no competition. And there was no male. And in fact, there has been a mechanism that made it possible to do parthenogenesis. And so there has been female, and this is interesting because to reproduce themselves, the two female has to simulate a coit to be able to produce a new lizard. And you can imagine that if a whip-tailed lizard has 2 eggs, after n stage, you have 2 up to n lizards. This is exponential. But if you have the classical sexual reproduction, if you have 2 eggs by lizard, after end stage, you have still end lizard. Because half of the lizard do not produce egg, but they consume energy. They have to eat. And this is the reason why some people that do a study in evolution, they consider that males, in fact, are an energy scandal, and they eat, they consume energy, but at the end they produce nothing. And it has been even estimated that, of course, anyway, we need males for the evolution, for the diversity of the reproduction. But we don't need one male for one female. It costs too much. And in fact, the optimum should be 10 to 15 males for 100 females. This is the optimum in terms of evolution. And so there has been a big question, why when we see newborn, there are quite as much as the same number of male and female. Why is there the same number of male and female? Well, why it should be enough to have 10 or 16 male for 100 female. And it has been Fisher who found, Fisher, you know Fisher, the statistician at the beginning of the 20th century, who found the solution. In fact, it comes from the evolution. You know, Fisher was, did study in genetics. In fact, if there are only 10% of male, a male to transmit its genes has interest to have to produce male gametes, because if it produces male gametes, then it will have newborns that are male, and these newborns that are male will have much more newborn themselves than if it was a female newborn. You understand what I say? No? If there are only 10% of male, male have much more newborn than female. And so, to transmit genes, there is an advantage to have male newborn, because they will have more newborn and I will transmit more and more my genes. And the equilibrium is at 50-50. And so there is no way to deal with that. And I think on an anthropological point of view, this is very important. Males are useless, but there is a necessity that half of newborn are males. We will come back on that. And so one solution to deal with this paradox is that males have to die. Males have to die, and so this is a possible explanation for which males are supposed to be courageous, males are violent, males go to war. This is a way to discard a certain number of males, because in fact they are useless. And you know, we speak a lot about femicide. You know femicide? The fact that males are killing females, this is called femicide. And indeed, when you look at figures, this is interesting. On the whole planet, indeed, when a human being kills another human being, 95% of the time it is a male that kills. You understand? And when a male kills, it is 20% of time of a male that he kills. 90% of time it is a male that he kills. And so malicide are much more frequent than femicide. And even when you don't count war, because if you add war, the ratio is even more important. And so this is curious to see how we speak a lot about femicide at the moment, while in fact in terms of epidemiology, malicide are much more frequent than femicide. Interestingly, in our society, in Occidental Europe, the number of homicides has decreased a lot. And when you look at precisely how this number of homicides decreased, it is much more on malicide than in femicide. And this is the reason why we are so interested in femicide in our society. This is because, in fact, they do not decrease. Our society becomes less and less violent. There are less homicide, but this decrease in homicide concerns malicide much more than femicide. And I don't know if I am clear. I am clear?
Yes.
Okay. I am clear. And of course, we will have to think about that. Why is there a difference about that? And in fact, this question of males have to die, this is more complex, and this can be explained by sex ratio at birth. You know that sex ratio at birth, you know that when you have 100 newborns that are females, there are statistically 105 newborns that are males. You know, there is a little bit more newborns that are males than female. Okay. In China, this is not 105, this is 120, as you know. And even for the third child, this is 150. And so the explanation, of course, as you know, is that female newborn have been killed. And there has been an estimation of the number of females that have been killed. 100 million of newborn girls have disappeared from the planet. And so the question is why? Because I told you my male should die, but in fact, in our society, we kill also females. And there is, in general, because this is not true in all societies, there is, in general, a preference for boys. And so why, obviously, you see, when we have to choose between a newborn that is a male and a female, obviously, in most situations, society prefer a male while they are supposed to be useless. So the first response is males are useful because they protect the tribe. But they protect the tribe from whom? From other male. This is exactly with the lion, you know. With the lion, the female lion takes the food, is hunting, produce babies, and the male is sleeping and is just fighting with other males. So this is not a good argument. It has been said by anthropologists that there is in most of our societies there are patrilineal societies. That is, when we have children, in fact, males stay in the tribe and women are going in another tribe for the gene diversity. And so we have interest to produce more males because they will be with us for a long time. They will still be in the tribe. I am not so convincing by this explanation neither, because the question is why are there patrilineal society? It has been said also that it comes from mythological narrative. For instance, Confucius and even the Bible suggest that males are likely to be more interesting for many reasons than females, as you know. Okay, but the answer is why? Why in this myth do they suggest that males are more interesting? Some feminists say, well, this is a male conspiracy. Male conspiracy that would exist in most countries for 1,000 years and even 10,000 years and even 100,000 years, because even in the long past it was exactly the same thing. I don't think that it is possible to be a male conspiracy. I think this is something emerging from the way we organize our society. And my interpretation, but this is that it is a reaction formation. You know what is a reaction formation? This is a psychoanalytic concept. This is many children that are shy can become politicians or because they are shy, they build themselves exactly as the opposite of what they are supposed to be. Some cop feel that there could be psychopath inside themselves, you know. They feel that the law is not so good, and because they feel that, but this is a day-to-day observation, you know. Some people who like to be dirty become very clean, they hate microbes, and in fact, when they do psychoanalysis, you realize that they like to deal with dirty things, etc. This is called reaction formation. And so my interpretation is that in our unconscious, we know that males are useless. You know that, we know that. And in many families, you have the wife like, but what do you do? I do the cooking, I do the kids, I am working, and you are looking at the TV and the football match. And so what are you doing? This is a metaphor about the fact that everybody knows that males are useless, but they are here. And so on a psychological point of view, this is very difficult. And so we put them exactly on the contrary. We decide that males are very important just because they are useless. This is a paradox, but this is our unconscious can lead to paradox. More seriously, and this is going to shock you, sex ratio at birth increase with socio-economical status of the mother. This is very easy to measure. This is not true perfectly, especially in our Occidental societies at the moment. This is less true than in the past, but this is quite solid data. That is, families with a high socio-economical status, they have more males than families from low socio-economical status. And so the question is why? And demographers say, well, this is because of selective abortion. But I am quite skeptical that there are so many selective abortions. Selective abortion is, it has to be technically possible. You know, you are supposed to be able to have abortion before when you know the sex of the fetus, and so, but you can do another way to do that, etc., etc. My feeling is that there could be an unconscious explanation here too. That is, you know that you have a high socio-economical status. You know that you have a female here, and unconsciously, all the family, when you have to move to go to a dinner, it can be dangerous for you because if your pregnancy is not so good, perhaps you are going to have a miscarriage or something like that. But if it is a boy, people will say, oh, be safe, don't move, etc. And if it is a female, perhaps they will say, okay, we are going to go to the dinner or to the cinema, there is no problem. But this is unconscious. This is unconscious, possibly. And there is another explanation. It is called, and it is fascinating on an epistemological point of view. It is the Trivers and Villard hypothesis. I don't know if you know that. This is really fascinating. It comes also from the evolution. Imagine that we are living in a society where, when a mother has a high condition, high socio-economical status, then the son has a high condition too, which is the case in our society. Imagine that when the son has a high condition, then there is a reproductive benefit, which is the case too. Then a mother with a high condition has an interest to have many males, as offspring, because if she has a high socio-economical status, then the son will have a high socio-economical status, then he will have more babies, then I will increase my probability to transmit my genes. And this is exactly the opposite for mother from a low socio-economical status. If they have a son, this son will have a low probability to reproduce, while if she has a daughter, daughters can always have babies. This is very easy. And so women from low socio-economical status have potentially an evolutionary benefit to have daughter. And this has been formulated as a conjecture, and of course it has been tested. And in mammals, there is a discussion about whether it is true or not, but meta-analyses are more in favor with this hypothesis. And so I have put a series of reference in mammals, in human beings, etc. And what are the explanation of that? What are the explanation? So we have seen explanation just in the previous slide. There are other explanation from a deeper unconscious. Perhaps you didn't know that after 1 week of pregnancy, there is a release of interleukin-2, and the level of interleukin-2 is different whether the fetus is a male or a female. And so a woman that is pregnant, just after a few days of pregnancy, she receives a signal that statistically give an indication about the sex of the fetus. And perhaps, on an evolutionary point of view, the woman decide to optimize or not the metabolism according to the sex of the fetus. This is a possibility, in particular the glucosis. And there is another explanation about the composition of milk. There are a couple of studies which show that the composition of milk of a woman that is breastfeeding, the composition of the milk is different whether the newborn is a male or a female. And there has been even a study which shows that the composition of milk was different whether the newborn was a female or a male, and whether the mother with a high socio-economical status or a low socio-economical status. These data are frail. We could discuss about methodological limits, but anyway, at least on an epistemological point of view, this is interesting to see how they raise questions. And so this is the conclusion of the paper. I don't say gender, I say sex. Sex is not random, even sex. We have the feeling that when we have a male or a female, this is random. In fact, this is likely not to be true. Then there is a question after the birth. And this, for us, child and adolescent psychiatrists, this is a big question. Are newborns that are male identical to female? And the answer is no, on a statistical point of view. And there has been experiments, and this one is birth weight. Of course, there is a difference, as you know, and it could come from androgen. The level of testosterone of a newborn is exactly the same in average as when he or she will become adolescent. So the level of testosterone of newborn is very, very, very high. And it is not known what is the reason for that. And of course, there is a difference between the level of testosterone between newborns that are male and female. Social perception. This is a very beautiful paper from the team of Simon Baron-Cohen. After a couple of hours of life, there was a test whether a newborn look at more the face of the young woman or a mobile that looks like that, but it is more some kind of Picasso painting or something like that. And you have some newborns that look at both faces equally. But when a newborn look at more one face than the other, you know that you see the difference between male and female are quite statistically significant, but quite different. And as you could plan, the male are looking more at the mobile than the woman face. This is the hypothesis of Simon Baron-Cohen. Autism could be related to an extremity of a male way of thinking. This is discussed, but he provided quite a non-negligible amount of. This has been replicated in monkey, in a more experimental design, because it was monkey. And you have also a couple of papers about imitation and skin-to-skin reaction. Very interesting skin-to-skin reaction between a father, the newborn, the mother, the newborn, whether the newborn is a male or a female, and you can see that the reaction of the newborn is different. Motherhood, fatherhood, male and female newborn. I am sure that many of you have children that are not so old, and so you have just experienced that recently. And of course, this is no more scientific. And on an epistemological point of view, this is important. From time to time, we look at papers. From time to time, because we are clinicians, we have to allow ourselves to look at what we see in the clinic. Because we need hypotheses, and hypotheses will come mainly from what we see in the clinic. And so what we see, when you have a baby here during 9 months, it makes things different. I will have never this possibility, and I know that my wife, because of that, you have an intimacy with your baby that is different from a male. This is just obvious. Delivery, this is not negligible, because when you deliver, when you are female, you know that in reality you have a baby. This is reality. For a male, these are words. This is true. All is words. Your wife say to you, this is your baby. This is your baby. And you give your name, this is your name. And even if you do genetics testing, this is a piece of paper. These are words. And words are different from flesh. Breastfeeding. This is not the same to feed like I did. I did that a lot of time, and this is kind. This is important that father give milk, but this is not the same as giving milk with your breast. And there are studies with that. You know, after 1 or 2 weeks of breastfeeding, the newborn is able to discriminate the odor of his mother. And as you know, odor are very important in life. And we come to something more psychodynamic, but nothing is forbidden. I don't think if you have realized the asymmetric intrafamilial pattern of interaction. Perhaps you never realized that breastfeeding is a pleasure. You have seen your babies during breastfeeding, this is shh. And this is the reason why, whether you are a male or a female newborn, you love your mother. You love your mother, whether you are a male or a female. And there is another point, you know, on a statistical point of view, there is a heterosexual preference. I know this is questionable, etc. I give you here an excellent paper, this one, 2020, about this question, which is a sensitive subject too, but on a statistical point of view, I make the hypothesis, for an evolutionary point of view, that there is a statistical heterosexual preference. And so, this is the reason why male newborn have an important relationship with their mother, and female newborn have an important relationship with their father. And you can see here, you can see the asymmetry. A male newborn focuses everything on his mother. why a male newborn focuses everything on his mother, while a female newborn can share her emotion with her mother and her father. And this explains very likely all what is about the frustration of male with females, etc. And on my opinion, this explains why there are femicides. There are femicides because some males realize that with their wife they don't find what they expected to find with their mother, and it will never be possible to happen again, and so they kill them because of their frustration. And this has been written by a novelist, and this is very impressive, and we come back to epistemology. You know, some novelists have the intuition of life that are extraordinary, and in a few words, they say things that 10 papers in Nature couldn't give. And you can see after that, each time a woman holds you in her arm and against her chest, these are merely condolences. You always come back to yell at your mother's grave like an abandoned dog. Never again, never again, never again. This is poetry. This is not science, but it makes sense. It makes sense. Now we enter to the end of the presentation. After that, I have spoken only about male and female up to now. And now we have to come to gender. And you know that there are gender stereotypes. That is, gender stereotypes. Men are supposed to be like that. Women are supposed to be like that. No need to enter in details. You know what I mean. More importantly, you know, human beings have ontological questions. From where do we come? Where will we arrive? The question of the origin, this is why we speak about God, about the Big Bang, about all those sort of things. And to be safe with that, we design mythological narrative. In religion, with science, there are mythological narratives. And among this mythological narrative, you have what is a man and what is a woman. And this is no more what is a male and what is a female. We have myths about men and women. And how these myths have been designed. First, we need myths. This is very important. We have to understand from where we come. Sex, in addition, is very important, and reproduction is very important on an evolutionary point of view. And so myths about gender are very, very, very strong in a society because it is a question of the origin and the question of sex and reproduction. And because we are much more clever in psychology than we think, that is, in real life, people do know that there is an unconscious. People do know that sometimes we say things that we don't really believe. And people, as I told you, and you were smiling, male are useless, but everybody knows that male are useless. Everybody in every country. And you know perfectly that male also do know that. And they try to make things to prove that they are useful. And at last, and this is also important for us scientists, we have a cognitive bias in line with statistical induction. That is, this is a human bias. When there is a statistical difference, we consider that this is a universal difference. When we say tobacco is not good, tobacco gives cancer, well, it depends. Many people smoke during all their life and they will not have cancer. And this is the same for cholesterol, and this is the same for all risk factors. This is statistics, this is not a law. But when you are in your medical study, people say tobacco gives cancer, cholesterol give atherosclerosis, etc. Cannabis give schizophrenia. You know, because we are not really at ease with statistical induction. We prefer universal law. And this is a major bias in the use of statistical tests in medical research, but this is another story. But we consider that because indeed male are statistically stronger physically than female, and that men are strong and women are weak. You know, there is a switch between a statistical rule and a universal law. And of course, there is a question that you know that is very important at the moment. Are you congruent? You are a male or a female, and are you congruent with the mythological narratives that are assigned to you because you are a male or a female? And you have seen, and this is completely normal for young children. They are male or female, and they know that, and you told them because you are a male, you are like that as a myth. And sometimes from them, they don't agree. They don't agree. They are, no, I want to be a boy. I want to go hunting and to play like that. And this is not the problem that I have no penis. I want to be a boy, and this is just normal. But the society gives strong incentive that female become woman. And of course, when it is not the case, it raises difficulties. And myths can be very strange. This is a discovery, a very recent discovery of Philippe Descola, amazing anthropologist for child and adolescent psychiatry. We could discuss about that. He found that in all culture, men are associated to animals and women are associated to vegetables. And it can explain why, you know, most vegan people are female, are women. And when there is an incentive that the society, there are more and more vegetarian or vegan, it is a way to feminize the society on an anthropological point of view. And of course, for anorexia nervosa, you know, you can understand that there is some kind of suggestion that women should eat less meat than women should eat less meat than male. There are plenty of papers about that. So this is my before last slide. To summarize, concerning anorexia nervosa, you have many non-specific factors that will give to anorexia nervosa. Johannes give many of them this morning, Esther also, Janet also yesterday, of course. And why is there a gender difference? Because there is an interaction between this non-specific factor and gender or sex variable. This is a statistical interaction. But here there is a big mess, big mess that we have discussed for quite 1 hour. I was too long, but and you know, and you have to realize that there is a big mess. There is a big mess. So what? You have to realize that there is a big mess. And this big mess is related to multiple theoretical fields. You have seen, we have discussed about anthropology, evolution, genetic, psychology, psychoanalysis, clinic, etc., etc. We need all these things to understand what is the question of being a male, a female, a woman, a man, how they behave, etc., etc. And of course, because data are lacking, we are anxious about all that because we don't understand. This is impossible to grasp everything. We are anxious. And when you are anxious, you develop defense mechanism. And the most simple is to over-specialize. That is, finally, you do only one thing. And this is very good to publish paper. So, just do it. But there is the risk that to over-specialize, you do not be anymore a scientist, you are an ideologue. You have only just one theoretical framework, you just see reality like that. and you have the feeling that you have the truth. And this is a disaster. So be careful, stay open, criticize yourself, never believe you have the truth. But also you have to do your job of a scientist. So once you have a big picture of your problem, once you have used your clinical knowledge to have a feeling about your scientific question, once you have done that, you are able to do a reduction, that is to see reality with some variable and a statistical model or other thing. This is how science works. Thank you.